You guys ever, think back to your childhood and just remember how easy life used to be, how simple things were? I remember about like 5 or 6 years old doing taxes, and it was just so straightforward. When I needed to write something down, I was like, oh hey, there's this wonderful flat surface in front of me that's the table, and I have a crayon in my hand, and now the flat surface that is the table has writing on it. It was just so easy. You didn't have to go get a sheet of paper. There was no stand up and walk over to a whiteboard. It was literally just flat surface with writing, done. So simple. How did we let things get so complicated? Sadly as an adult, I'm burdened with knowledge of how expensive desks are and how hard they are to resurface or repair if you were to just actually scribble on them. But thankfully what I am not burdened by is the knowledge of how hard they are to make. Which is why, right now in my garage, I have an entire slab of wood and some whiteboard paint, and I'm gonna try to make an entire desk that is a whiteboard so that I can just return to Monkey and just write on the fucking table like an absolute Neanderthal. How hard could it really be? I mean, it's flat surface, whiteboard paint. 1 + 1 = 2, and then you have a whiteboard desk. Yeah, let's see how this goes. So the first coat of paint and primer went on super easily, actually. It took about 30 minutes to sand the edges and what I'm calling the top of the table, and then putting the paint on. It was pretty good. The only hiccup is that the edges are too rough to be painted. I didn't actually buy tabletop lumber. I literally just went and found pretty much the cheapest chunk of load-bearing marine grade lumber I could find. So the edges on it are pretty rough. And even once I sanded them so they're smooth to the touch, it's still too rough to actually paint. So I went back out to the hardware store and I did some digging, and I found these dudes in the sheet metal section. And they have just the perfect thickness to actually be a trim for the top of the table. And I think that framing the whiteboard with this nice shiny aluminum will look absolutely awesome. I just have to drill a whole bunch of holes in them, and then I'll just screw them into the sides, and that will solve the siding issue. And I think it'll look even nicer than I originally planned. I'm gonna go put another couple coats of primer on though. First coat came out pretty thin, so yeah, it's probably gonna be 3 coats. This has been a hell of a day. After the whole trim debacle, I decided to put another coat of paint down, and it looked pretty good, and I was right on the verge of just saying that was gonna be good, but just in the notion of doing my due diligence, I decided to sand it and paint it one last time, and it looked really good after that. And so from there, I was torn as to whether or not I was going to do the whiteboard finish tonight or tomorrow. It seemed pretty in-depth. It was a little bit complicated. It was the whole hey, we gave you an A and a B and you have to mix them, and then you only have 90 minutes to apply it, which should be plenty, but some of the reviews on Amazon actually said that time frame was exaggerated a good bit. So I was kind of torn, but it takes 3 to 4 days to cure, and I had time, so I decided to do it. So I was hoping to cut the cans in half, basically, and do a half batch today, take a look tomorrow, maybe do another half batch if needed. But that didn't work out because either I didn't cut it in half right, or it didn't cover as much as I thought it was going to cover. Because I cut it in half, and then I basically painted a third, maybe half of the load-bearing whiteboard, the desk, whatever you want to call it. So I basically just impromptu said, fuck it, and mixed the entire batch, and used my newly refined paint skills to use 50 square feet of paint to cover 15 square feet of paint in what has got to be the world's thickest coat of paint. So hopefully it only takes 1 coat, because I don't have any more of that finish. It's been 10-15 minutes though. I washed everything off, came back in. It's looking really good. I'm hoping it turns out. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in a couple days once it's done curing and we can actually mount it to the legs and maybe have a desk. That would be pretty nice. Hi past me, future me here. Let's see how that plan turned out. Now, right off the bat, pretty good sign. There's enough gloss to actually properly draw a dry erase marker on, so that's good. We're halfway there. Unfortunately, there is way too much texture to be able to properly erase that. so that's not fun. And also, if you look pretty closely, there's a lot of lint stuck under the finish, just like blue lint. I have a hunch that it's from the shop rags that I used to wipe it down after sanding. I guess they just left a lot of lint behind, not really sure. Anyways, that was fun, so, 7 out of 10. You nailed the white paint, and you got enough gloss on there to actually draw on it, but it needs a whole lot less texture. And unfortunately, it took 3 days to cure, which was 3 days of me just sitting there wondering if this was gonna work. And then I realized that it didn't work, and then it took another 5 days for the second batch of finish to show up at my house after I ordered it. For context, the first batch of finish got to my house in under 24 hours. When I didn't have anything else to even start the project. But now that the project's going, and it's like mostly completed in my garage, and I also have a whole bunch of boxes piling up in my living room from the other furniture that I would like to use once the whiteboard is done, it's gonna be 5 days. So that was great. So anyways, today is a Monday because it took more than a week for me to get a second stab at it between all of that. So I had the wonderful privilege today of spending my evening sanding, painting, and refinishing this whiteboard for a second time, when really all I just want to do is play Core Keepers. On the upshot, because I freed so much time this weekend, I was able to 3D print this. And if this looks like a terrifying bayonet for paint rollers, you would be correct. I will be using it to stab the paint roller into the ground and spray it with high-speed water from a distance. Anyways, we'll get to more of that later. So I got out there and sanded everything down. That went pretty well. I just wanted to make sure I got things that much smoother before I went through all of this for a second time. Decided to put down another coat of white to try to cover up the lint from the first time and just to make it that nice ultra white whiteboard look. And then it came time for gloss, which again makes me a little nervous because you have to mix the A into the B and I only have the one can of it and you have to paint it on before it all dries and just deactivates and becomes useless. So I got that all mixed up in my little paint roller tray, put the paint roller in there and put it down on the whiteboard, and immediately after the first stroke realized that it wasn't the shop rags that left the lint behind, it was the paint roller. The paint roller left lint behind in the paint. Do you guys understand how stabbed in the back I feel right now? I paid money for this thing to do a single job, and it left lint behind in the paint while I have the finish mixed up, which again is like a weird chemical reaction thing and you only have so long to apply it. So I kind of lost my mind. Basically sat there and tried to dab as much of the lint out with a shop rag as I could when my girlfriend had tweezers pulling the bigger pieces out. And then after 2 or 3 minutes, I was like, I just have to keep applying more paint or more finish, or this is all just gonna be useless and not work. So she was awesome and kind of just kept pulling out the bigger pieces while I painted the rest of the whiteboard. But oh my God, I paid money for a paint roller and then I used it to paint something, and it unknowingly to me fucked me over the first time and the second time. Holy shit, that was fun. Anyways, once that was all done, I went outside and washed everything off. Here's where the paint roller bayonet comes in, because I was able to screw that in and stab it into the ground and shoot it with some high-speed water, which was awesome. I'll put a video of that right here. And now we answer the question, how fast can a paint roller spin?
It's being killed.
All right, so I'm trying to stay optimistic. So scientific method, round 3. Let's go check on the whiteboard. As you can see, there are some places that work absolutely perfectly. Marker goes on really clean, marker comes off really clean. Awesome. There are some other places though where the marker goes on really well and just doesn't erase very great. It's still a huge step better than last time though. It's still not quite there. And maybe even bigger is that there's actually some dust and dirt that's still stuck under the finish. If you look over there, that's actually a mosquito that got stuck under the finish. And as much as I'm for having like brush strokes and, rough edges here and there, angles that aren't perfect because something's handmade, having an entire mosquito that's stuck under the finish of a desk that I want to use for several years is just not really a look that I'm going for. So those are kind of the two problems that we're up against right now. The dry erase is simple in theory. I just have to make this whiteboard absolutely perfectly smooth, Morty. It's gotta be perfectly smooth, Morty. Simple in concept. It's gonna take a lot of elbow grease and sanding, but we'll get there. The dirt and dust problem is a lot harder though. I was trying to figure out why I've never run into this issue before. Like I painted pretty much my entire house when I moved in, and this was like never a concern. So I'm trying to figure out like why this was such a big deal. And I think I stumbled onto something really, really interesting. So this is gonna seem a little bit far-fetched, but just like bear with me for a minute. I obviously live in Florida. There's a lot of really strange things happen in Florida all the time. But I want to talk about like something that's very specific to my geographical region. There's this weird effect called gravity that takes like dirt and dust and stuff in the air, I guess, and like pulls it towards the floor, which is kind of a problem when my whiteboard is laying on the floor face up drying for 3 to 5 hours, because that's the other half of it, is there's not that much dirt and dust in the air, but it takes 3 to 5 hours to dry, so a lot of that stuff can accumulate over time. So that's hard, how do you solve gravity? I can't just move to another house that doesn't have gravity just so that I can build a desk. But there's 2 fixes that I came up with, and I'm actually pretty proud of them. So the first one is that I'm gonna put a dehumidifier in the garage to get the paint to dry as fast as possible. Kind of feel like I should have done that from the get-go, and that it was kind of a bad thing that I didn't. So we're just gonna move on from that one. But the second one is pretty ingenious. So I designed and 3D printed these little legs that attach to the desk and hold the desk upright so that after I sand and paint and finish the desk, I could flip it upright, nail these little feet onto it, and now, instead of making the desk as a floor that I convert into a desk, because it's upright, it's actually now a wall that's going to be converted into a desk at the end. And as I said earlier, gravity only affects floors. It only takes things in the air and pulls them towards the floor. I've never been pulled towards the wall before in my house. So I think this will solve that problem actually quite nicely. So yeah, all I gotta do is sand, paint, and finish the desk, and then convert it into a wall temporarily, and hopefully that takes care of these things. Let's see how this works out, all right? Couldn't beat him. Couldn't do it. Isaac Newton is just too powerful. He knows too much. He used my own spells against me. He took the paint that I had on the whiteboard when I turned it into a wall, and he said, no, fuck you, and just took the paint all the way down to the floor and made it super runny and ripply and awful and disgusting. No, fuck that. It's just time for an entirely different approach. When you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, find a new tunnel. So I'm tossing an idea around in my head for a little bit that instead of taking a sheet of wood and painting it white and then putting whiteboard paint on top, I could paint it white and just put a giant sheet of acrylic on top and then literally just bolt it down. It's like a super smooth brain solution to, I'm not skilled enough to paint this, I'm just gonna go find a thing that does what I want and literally bolt it down. But there's actually some merit to this idea. The more I thought about it, I eventually realized like, oh hey, I could print off a diagram of something that I want to mark up and like slip it between the acrylic and the wood and then actually be able to dry erase on top of the diagram, which is dope. And if I painted the whiteboard onto the wood, I wouldn't be able to do that. But even more interesting is if I'm gonna go that far, why not go down to the office supply store and print off an entire sheet of paper? And that now I don't have to paint the wood at all. I can literally just put a sheet of paper down that has whatever design I want. I could have like some graph paper over here, a blank calendar over there, some cool artsy thing over there. None of those things I'd be able to paint, and if I did, they'd be like stuck there forever. But now I could just have an office supply store, print them off onto a sheet of paper, throw the sheet of paper between the acrylic and the wood and call it a day. And then if I ever wanted a different color whiteboard or something with a different design, I'd just print off another sheet of paper and put it down. It's actually kind of a huge advantage to just do it the small brain way. So yeah, that's what I decided to do. I spent today going back out to the store and buying another chunk of wood and sanding it. Didn't even paint it or anything. Got a chunk of acrylic. The only problem is the chunk of acrylic that I needed was so big that they couldn't cut it for me in the store. So I had to bring it home and score it. And scoring and breaking acrylic is, you know, kind of a painful process. And it's even more painful when it's a 6-foot long break that you have to make. But I did it and it came out almost perfectly clean. In the parts that were a little bit jagged, I just took the Dremel to and smoothed them out, sanded them down. Actually turned out great. So from there, all I had to do was drill a couple holes in the edge, mount the trim that I made like, what, 3-4 weeks ago now? And then I just drilled some holes through the acrylic and the wood to match, and that's it. Feels really weird to say, but like basically in an entire afternoon, it went from absolute hopelessness and Isaac Newton just beat me up and took my lunch money to I think it's done. So now I just have to actually assemble the whole thing. The legs I bought from a company that does standing desks. They literally sell them as a kit, so I'm hoping that's super easy. But yeah, I just gotta clean up everything else in here, and then we can build the new desk. Let's see how this turns out. Here goes nothing. Screw you, Isaac Newton. The leg kit was really straightforward. Took a little bit of time, but it was probably the easiest part of this whole thing, which is good because they were literally part of a kit that I paid money for. After that, it was super straightforward to drill about 10 holes and screw the chunk of wood into the legs. That went really well. And then flipped it upright, and the moment of truth came where I got to peel the protective film off the acrylic and make sure that it was actually clear. That protective film is awesome. If you've ever pulled off, like, you know, screen protector off a new phone or anything off an appliance, it's like that, except it's 6 feet long. So good. I did the first corner and just sat there smiling to myself. My girlfriend wanted to do the rest of it, so I said yes, because that's what love looks like. But yeah, after that, 5 bolts, put it onto the chunk of wood, and then I pretty much just used it for a week right like that. It worked really good. After I knew that everything was going to work and this was the solution, I went down to the office supply store and said, hey, I need you to print off this image for me. It was really funny because the lady thought that it hadn't loaded, and I had to be like, no, you gotta zoom out, it's like entirely white. And she was like, why are you printing off an image that's entirely white? And after I explained what it was for, they printed it off for me for like $9, which is awesome because if I ever want like a new pattern or new colors, it's literally less than $10, and I can have an entirely new surface for my desk, which is awesome. Mounting the paper was super easy. Just got to roll it out on top of the wood, put the acrylic back down over it, and ta-da! Feels like a whole new office. It's awesome to be able to stand up and sit here and record with you guys. Stand up and sit here. Anyways, built this bookshelf while I was at it, threw some lighting behind it. That should be a really nice backdrop for recording from now on. At least once the shelf isn't quite so blank and this wall behind me isn't quite so blank. But I'm sure I'll figure out what's going to go there in due time. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, comments, or feedback for me, as always, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. If you want to see what I end up putting here, you probably catch me first on Twitch. If you don't catch me there, I'll catch you guys really soon right back here. I think that brings us to the end of this project. As always, I hope you guys have a great day, and if it's a Friday, have a great weekend. Catch you guys soon.